So let's talk about Kenya's ambitious new digital ID, the Maisha Namba. On the surface, it sounds like progress, right? A huge leap into a modern digital future. But what if it's actually a phantom? What if it's a system that threatens to make millions of its own citizens just disappear?
Let's start with a number that really frames this whole story. 5 million. That's how many Kenyans, many from communities that have been marginalized for decades, are now at risk of what's being called digital erasure because of this brand new system.
And look, this isn't just some abstract tech issue. The government's whole digital-first push is having some really devastating, real-world consequences for people. We're talking about their rights as citizens being thrown into chaos, getting trapped in these bureaucratic nightmares, facing incredible delays, and even being forced to pay bribes just to get a basic ID card.
So here's how we're going to break this all down today. First, we'll see how this system actually creates exclusion. Then we'll dig into its troubled history as a so-called phantom project. We'll look at how it seems to be a failure by design, see its echoes of a colonial past, and then finally explore what it would actually take to rebuild digital trust.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1, a system of exclusion. And here's the crazy paradox. How does a tool that's supposed to give people legal recognition become the very thing that blocks them from it?
Well, check this out. To try and force everyone onto the new Maisha card, the state just stopped printing the old IDs. And what happened? An estimated 600,000 people who had applied were left in a total legal limbo. They couldn't get the old ID and they couldn't get the new one because it was stuck in court. You know, this is a really crucial point. This system isn't just creating new problems, it's actually automating old ones. We're talking about decades of discrimination against communities like the Nubians and others, and now all that bias is being hard-coded, literally written into the code of Kenya's digital future.
So, you have to ask, how did we even get to this point? Well, this isn't the government's first rodeo. As we're about to see, the Maisha Namba system was basically born from the ashes of another spectacular failure, a phantom project that already created massive public distrust.
And this timeline just shows you this wild, chaotic cycle. They launch a system, the High Court declares it illegal, they rebrand it, and then they try to accelerate the rollout all over again, often without even fixing the fundamental legal problems. It's just rinse and repeat.
And we are not talking about a minor little setback here. The system that came before this, Huduma Namba, was called a complete fraud and a phantom project by Kenya's own president. It cost the public $100 million and delivered almost nothing. So you can see why people are so skeptical this time around.
You know, this quote from the High Court really just nails it. In the mad rush to roll out the tech, the government completely blew past all the necessary legal checks and balances. They literally put the technological cart way out in front of the human rights horse.
And that leads us perfectly into our third section, failure by design. Because the exclusion we're seeing, it's not some unfortunate accident, it's the direct result of skipping critical steps, which bakes bias right into the system from the very start.
Really, it all boils down to one critical, mandatory step they just decided to skip. Something called a Data Protection Impact Assessment, or DPIA. Think of it as a risk assessment. It's designed to find and fix problems before you launch. But instead of doing this first, they just went for it.
This table just lays it out so clearly. At every single stage, the process was broken. Public participation was just a box-ticking exercise. The legal framework was rushed through. And of course, they skipped that crucial risk assessment before deployment. Each failure just piled on top of the last, creating a system that was almost guaranteed to be unfair.
And this right here, this shows you the accessibility bias in a nutshell. I mean, how can you build a digital-first system when the digital divide is this massive? In the capital, Nairobi, you've got 43% internet access, but you go to parts of Turkana and it plummets to less than 2%. The system is designed for a country that doesn't actually exist for millions of its people.
Okay, so now let's widen the lens a bit in Section 4, a colonial echo. Because to really understand what's happening with Maisha Namba, you have to look at Kenya's history, but also at the stark reality of its infrastructure today.
This comparison is so powerful. Kenya's entire ID system is a direct descendant of the colonial-era Kipande, a physical passbook the British used to monitor and control the population. The big risk today is that this new centralized biometric database just becomes a much more powerful version of that same tool of control.
And this is where the high-tech promises just crash into these absurd on-the-ground realities. This number, 3,000 Kenyan shillings.
That's how much someone in a place like Lamu has to pay for a high-speed Maria boat just to get to an office to apply for their ID. The system is asking people to make a digital leap when they can't even afford the physical journey.
So, with such a failed history and a flawed design, is this whole project just doomed? Well, not necessarily. Our final section actually lays out a pretty clear 5-step path to rebuilding the one thing that's been completely lost: digital trust.
And really, this is the core principle it all comes down to. The most important piece of a digital state isn't the server. It's not the algorithm. It's public trust. Without that, any government system, no matter how shiny and advanced, is either going to fail or, worse, become a tool of oppression.
So here they are, 5 concrete steps to earn back that trust. First, make it voluntary, not mandatory, so people actually want to join. Second, do those transparent risk assessments before you collect any more data. Third, build a real legal framework in Parliament. Fourth, help the people who are already undocumented get their basic papers, like birth certificates, first. And finally, fix the real-world infrastructure gaps. You can't build a digital roof when the physical foundation isn't even there.
So we end with this question, which is really at the heart of this entire debate. In this big rush to digitize everything, is the technology actually serving the people? Or has the person just become another data point for the state to manage, to monitor, and, for 5 million people, to potentially erase?